Welcome into the On3 studios here in Nashville, Tennessee. It's the Wiltfong Whip Around with Steve Wiltfong. Today is June 3rd, and I am your host, Josh Newberg. Glad to be back in the On3 studios after a really fun week at the W Hotel for the On3 Elite Series. You guys saw all the content that we had coming out of that, and if you haven't yet, go check out those interviews. All right, we got a lot to cover because there were some big visit weekends at Georgia, Alabama, LSU, Ohio State, and more. We'll cover it all, but first, make sure you are subscribed to the On3 Recruits channel, the greatest recruiting channel on YouTube. Lock in with us. Hit subscribe for me, please. All right. June is here. The first weekend of the summer official visit season is in the books. We're going to look at some of the biggest developments on the recruiting trail. And this weekend, we saw some big predictions by Steve Wiltfong, and here's a look. A couple of these stand out to me. Keelan Russell, the quarterback, committed to SMU. Steve dropped a pick for him to flip to Alabama. I thought that was huge. And then edge Damian Shanklin to LSU. You know, I knew he was on campus this weekend for an official visit. It must have went really well because Steve put in a prediction for him. So we'll talk about that and more on today's show. All right, let's bring on Steve Wiltfong and welcome in. Steve, we're going to start the show with the UGA Bulldogs because Georgia's heating up. They currently sit at number 7 overall in the On3 industry team rankings, and over the weekend, they hosted several more top targets. Steve, it sounds like you expect Georgia to sign a bunch of these guys. You put in a new prediction for the number 1 linebacker in America, Zayden Walker, and offensive tackle Nick Brooks. Walk us through those picks.
Well, Zayden Walker, we've been talking about Georgia's position at the top of his recruitment for quite some time now. Now, he's given a good look to South Carolina and Miami and programs like that, has had Penn State as one of his finalists. But Georgia's been setting the bar in this recruitment because of the way that they produce linebackers, the way that they get them to the first round, his relationship with Glenn Schumann and company. Georgia checks all the boxes for Zayden Walker. And coming out of this official visit, I think the Bulldogs are the one to beat. And we'll see if he jumps in the class soon. Kirby Smart and company, they want to get commitments from these official visits sooner rather than later. They want this class done going into the season. I like where they stand with Zayden Walker. Nick Brooks has been to campus a few times now. I felt Georgia was the one to beat, but talking to some sources that spent time with him this weekend, they've doubled down on that. And so with that, my On3 RPM reflects that.
All right. Now, who else do you feel Georgia made up some ground on or is making up ground on?
Well, I think the next On3 RPM I could make in favor of Georgia is for Laganza Shady Hayward, the in-state safety. Tennessee has been the one to beat for quite some time now, but Georgia getting them back to campus. It was a terrific official visit. He gave it high marks, called it a business trip, and talking to some sources that spent time with him, they also think Georgia's in the driver's seat right now. So it looks like Tennessee will have to flip it back if they want to land one of their top targets because the momentum is with Georgia.
Now let's talk about those USC Trojan commitments that were on campus. We're talking 5-star defensive lineman Justice Terry, 5-star edge Isaiah Gibson. You liked where Georgia sat heading into these visits. Did anything happen this weekend and change your mind?
Well, I still think that Georgia has a good chance to land both of them. Justice Terry, 5-star defensive tackle, heard him and his mother. Had a fantastic time at Georgia. I think that one's still trending correctly for Georgia to get him back in the fold. Isaiah Gibson, it's easy to just assume that he'll ultimately end up at Georgia. We thought that before he committed to USC. I think it's going to be hard for USC to keep him in the class. But Georgia, they got some serious competition. You got Tennessee, Auburn, South Carolina, and Oklahoma in the mix here. And as you have these exit meetings on Sundays where you talk about things like NIL, recruitments get a little murkier. So we'll see if Georgia can get it done. They check a lot of boxes for Isaiah Gibson, but he's expected to continue through his process now. And we'll see what that means for Georgia down the road.
Yeah, Georgia sits at number 7 overall, but if they land a couple of these guys that you put in picks for, they are going to be rising up the ranks. So Dog fans, talk to me. Comment section below. How do you feel about Georgia's first big official visit weekend? Not the last, but definitely the first. There's some guys that could end up in this class. Let me know. Comment section below. All right, let's head out to the Bayou where LSU's 5-star weekend was going off. Now, let's start with cornerback DJ Pickett. You and I had some time to spend with him in Nashville. He told me, do not sleep on Oregon. Now, I know we're not sleeping on Oregon, LSU was this weekend. What are you hearing coming out of this official visit for DJ Pickett?
We're not sleeping on a few schools: Oregon, Miami, Florida, all with great seasons, a lot of runway to make a move for DJ Pickett. But coming out of this official visit and even coming into the official visit, I think it's been LSU setting the bar, setting the tone in this recruitment. It's because of Corey Raymond and what he's done historically at the position. Family has a connection with Patrick Peterson, and then you show up on your official visit and Patrick Peterson's there talking about his own process as a former five-star, why he picked LSU. Corey Raymond, now he told DJ to take his time, go through the process himself and enjoy it. But what LSU's been able to done with the DBs historically, specifically with Corey Raymond, he feels so comfortable in Baton Rouge. LSU's got the number 2 class in the country right now, and I think that they're the one to beat for DJ Pickett as he continues through his process. But he's going to take it into the season. He's going to watch teams play. He's going to continue to evaluate his top options. So just because the pulse, I think, is a certain way right now, there's plenty of runway for some of these other schools to make a move. And you and I both are keeping a keen eye on Miami and the season that they're going to have with his family ties to Miami, his cousins playing there, his uncle played there. Been to Miami a lot. They're Miami fans in the house. But LSU, this family, DJ Pickett, they're becoming big LSU fans right now as this process continues.
Yeah. All right. Let's keep with the 5-star thing. We're only talking 5-star updates in this LSU segment here. Khalid Lockett and Jamie French, they were both on campus, and they were both here in Nashville spending time with Bryce Underwood. We know Bryce Underwood was in their ear, and we also kind of know that, hey, LSU might have a little bit of ground to make up on both of these prospects, but what are you hearing after their official visits?
Well, Josh, we've talked about Jamie French a lot on this show, and we've said, look, Alabama led. He was at one point committed to Alabama. Then Ohio State led in the spring. Texas took command of this recruitment following a recent visit to Austin. But with that, things can change on a dime here. He was at LSU this past weekend. He told us Texas was his leader at the On3 Elite Series. Now he told me he's rethinking a lot of things after this visit to LSU. So, look, man, the quote from Jamie French on his visit, he loved it, just the brotherhood, the tradition, the culture itself, and the people in the building for sure. So LSU, at the very least, giving Texas a run for their money. They could be in pole position. Now, he's got his upcoming visit to Texas, so the Longhorns could potentially swing it back. And I know, talking to Khalid Lockett in Nashville as well, that Texas was the leader for him. So Texas trying to sign a special recruiting class with DeCorian Moore, also a top target. For more on him later, as he was at Ohio State. But LSU, I asked Khalid Lockett if things were changing at the top of his list, and he sent back a lot of emojis that made me think that LSU is certainly gave him a great visit. And he just said the people at LSU make it special. When you go to the state of Louisiana, LSU runs the state. He talked about the culture, talked about not only the history of putting receivers in the league, but some of the best wideouts in the NFL right now are from LSU. So it's an attractive place to both these wideouts, and I don't think LSU is going to strike out on the two of these guys.
Right. Yeah. I was penciling in Khalid Lockett to this LSU class. We'll see how that works out. But Jamie French making a run at him, that's interesting. Let's move on to 5-star offensive lineman Solomon Thomas, and he's been committed to Florida State for some time now. Took his official visit to LSU this weekend. Steve, will the Tigers flip him from the Seminoles?
Look, Solomon Thomas was gushing about his visit yesterday, talked about Coach Brad Davis and just the standard that he holds his offensive linemen to. He hasn't seen that anywhere else in his perspective. He talked about Will Campbell and Emory Jones, the two bookend tackles that are going to hear their names called high in the NFL draft. He talked about it's Joe Moore Award or nothing else for LSU's offensive line. He just talked about the leadership position that those guys are in on the football team. Really impressed him. Look, I woke up to him sending me a bunch of photos from his photo shoot at LSU too. So we talked yesterday. Then he followed back up with some more LSU stuff today. LSU, man, they crushed it with him. Micah DeBose was another offensive lineman on campus that LSU, talking to sources that spent time with him, they think that they lead. People at Alabama around that program that spent time with him feel the same. So be interesting to see where that one shakes out. But LSU in the middle of it for two of the country's best offensive linemen following the weekend. Solomon Thomas is going to go to Florida State at the end of the month, sandwich a Florida visit in between. So we'll know a lot more coming out of those trips. But, man, it was a tone-setting visit for LSU.
All right, another 5-star recruitment that's heating up in LSU's favor is cornerback Dorian Brew. What's the intel after his official?
Well, obviously family ties to LSU. His dad was an All-American in track and field there. So they've been there a bunch. Now, you and I talked to Dorian Brew at the Odd 3 Elite Series. I got the sense USC was a favorite. Ohio State was right there. So I put LSU down as a dark horse because of just the family ties, Corey Raymond, and the tradition. And talking to Dorian Brew's dad, he kind of pointed to some of the high-tech stuff that LSU has to even make sure that the eyes of their DBs are looking in the right place where they're on the field. LSU has some of the best technology in the country for developing their players. I've heard quarterbacks talk about it. Now I'm hearing defensive backs talk about it, and that was really attractive. They also think that Dorian could play early at LSU, so that's another element that's working for the Tigers. He's still trying to figure out his official visits moving forward. He's got some set, but I think he's trying to work Ohio State in there. USC, again, is a favorite. Texas is supposed to be this coming weekend, so we'll see what happens with the Longhorns.
All right, now 4-star edge Damian Shanklin. He's from the middle of Big Ten country in Indianapolis, Indiana, and Notre Dame had been trending for him. A lot of the Big Ten schools were involved in him, and he goes to LSU this weekend. Now, we had spoken about this visit coming up, but I didn't really think too much of it until I saw on Sunday you dropped a prediction for Damian Shanklin to LSU. What changed on the visit?
Well, Josh, this started developing when he visited Baton Rouge for the spring game and got a chance to spend a lot of time with Bryce Underwood and LSU's commits. He felt like he really fit in with those guys. The fan support at that spring game, the way that they made Damian Shanklin feel around the program, they made it feel like home. Bo Davis was recruiting him at Texas, now recruiting him at LSU. That relationship is strong. He thinks that's a coach that can get the most out of him. Then he comes back for his official visit. He gets a chance to chill with the players. He really liked that. He feels like everyone's bought in for a championship, got to know the whole coaching staff. And I asked him if LSU was setting the pace for him in his recruitment at this point in the process. And he said, yeah. So the RPM is in to reflect that. They'll have to hold off programs like Ohio State, Tennessee, and Alabama. But LSU pushing all the right buttons through 2 visits with Damian Shanklin.
What a big visit for LSU. So Tiger fans, tap in with us, comment section below. How do you feel about the 5-star visitors? What are we thinking? Who could be next? And what do you think of Steve's pick for Damian Shanklin to LSU? Comment section below. All right, Ohio State's weekend, it moved the needle with a couple key targets, especially number 1 wide receiver DeCorian Moore. And Steve also dropped some new RPM picks for the Buckeyes. We're going to get into it all, Steve. Let's just start right there with the number 1 wide receiver in America, DeCorian Moore. You and I talked to him in Nashville, sounded really good for the Texas Longhorns, but he continued to mention Ohio State in that visit that was coming up. Well, he's taken that visit. It's over. What are you hearing on DeCorian Moore after his official to Ohio State?
Well, he's been to Ohio State 3 times now. His mom's been there twice, and his great aunt, who's like a mom to his mother, she was there this weekend. She's giving Ohio State her blessing. Marjan Moore, mom of DeCorian Moore, she said her aunt bleeds burnt orange, but on the way out said I could understand why Corey would pick this place, and she gave it her blessing. Look, Devin Sanchez, longtime Ohio State commit, 5-star corner. He flew in and surprised DeCorian Moore to peer recruit him. They spent time together at the Odd 3 Elite Series. Then Devin Sanchez and his family go up to Columbus this weekend to help recruit DeCorian Moore and his family. Marjan mentioned some of the same things that have impressed in the past, the way that Ohio State addresses mental health with their players. And she says they're ahead of the curve in that regard. She really pointed to the brotherhood at Ohio State, pointed to the fact that they've had a couple players that are injured, but they're still inside the facility, still part of the brotherhood, still working out, still have access to all the job potential that Ohio State offers. Being in the city of Columbus, I think, was attractive. A major college program in a major city has some things that are exciting for DeCorian Moore. And certainly Ryan Day's offense, Brian Hartline's track record for developing receivers, all those things were attractive this weekend. And Jacorian Moore, on one of his last visits, he got to watch him practice. He loves the intensity that Ohio State goes at there. So look, it'd be easy for us to sit here and say this young man's going to end up at Texas. There's nothing that's happening that makes me not make them the odds-on favorite. But Ohio State's gotten 3 visits. I think people that spent time with Jacorian Moore feel good that there's a chance that he could end up in Ohio State's class. He's going to be at LSU next weekend. Then he's got Texas and Oregon. Then he's going to try and make a final decision going into his senior year. And Ohio State has a lot of the things he's looking for. So we'll see what happens as he continues through it.
So as it stands now, do you still feel more confident in Texas' chances or Ohio State?
I do, but I'm not ready to call him a lock to Texas. And if he picked Ohio State, I would not be surprised. Look, he committed early to LSU. One of his favorite players played at LSU. Certainly what they've done with wideouts. But as he's gone through his process and he's looked at all arenas of a decision, which in addition to player development, which Ohio State takes second to nobody at the wide receiver position. Just again, what Ohio State offers off the field has really impressed Corian and his family, from the brotherhood to the job opportunities in Columbus to what it means to be an alumni to from Ohio State, to the way they take care of their players' mental health. Buckeyes have some momentum in this one going into the next wave of visits.
All right. Now, Vernell Brown III, he's another one that, Steve, I kind of feel like heading into the visit, the Buckeyes had work to do. And it's really Vernell Brown, Ohio State, and the schools in the state of Florida, namely Florida State and Florida. Vernell Brown visited Ohio State this weekend. Did the Buckeyes do what they needed to do?
Absolutely. Look, we talked to him at the On3 Elite Series. Florida and Florida State had the momentum. But Ohio State, we considered them the leader in the spring, and I asked him if this bit reminded him of why he liked Ohio State so much in the first place, and he said absolutely. I mean, he said it's one of the few schools that has everything I'm looking for in all aspects. Now, his dad and his brother have been to Ohio State with him in the past. This time he brought his sisters and his mom as well. The whole family had a ball. Vernell said it was amazing, and they do a good job all around. So if Ohio State were to come back and land Vernell, they could land Corian. Dalen McCutcheon was another blue-chip receiver on campus this weekend. They got a shot to land each and one of these guys, and I think that Ohio State has thrusted themselves back into the lead group for Vernell following this visit, and we'll see how Florida and Florida State stack up with Ohio State following those officials.
Yeah, with Ohio State taking that first visit weekend, I got to think no RPM pick in for Ohio State. Florida and Florida State got to like the feel of that coming out of here, knowing that they get a shot at him and they'll get the final crack at him before he ends up making a decision in July. Now, 2 guys that you did put picks in for, edge Justin Hill and running back Bo Jackson. Now, I would probably say the Bo Jackson RPM pick surprised me the most, only based on what we had talked about just 2 weeks ago when he was at the UGA scavenger hunt and how things seemed to be going in Georgia's direction. But he was back in Columbus this weekend. It must have just reminded him why most of those in-state stars stay in-state and play for the Buckeyes.
Well, I talked to some sources around some of those other programs that are finalists, and they like where Ohio State stands for Bo. Bo had a great visit to Ohio State this weekend. Running back is a huge need for them this cycle, as they will ultimately need to replace their 2 standout running backs at the top of the depth chart in Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. So Ohio State is going to try and sign 3 this cycle. Bo Jackson, the number 4 athlete in the On3 industry rankings, is one of their most coveted targets. Carlos Laughlin's the lead recruiter there. He's been what appears to be a monster addition to the coaching staff from a recruiting standpoint, with who Ohio State's in the middle of it for. And I think that they lead for Bo Jackson. Now, he said he had an amazing official to Georgia in May. He's looking forward to his visit to Alabama coming up. But Ohio State, him getting around the players on the team was big this weekend. He had a phenomenal visit with Chip Kelly, Ryan Day, and Coach Laughlin. So I like where it sits for Ohio State, and so do people around the country that are also trying to nab this young man.
All right, now tell us, Justin Hill, that one, now he's another in-state guy for the Buckeyes, and you put a pick in. What went down over the weekend to put your pick in?
Well, I've been liking Alabama for the last month or so in this recruitment. His family, Alabama fans, he's had a couple great visits to Tuscaloosa where he's liked the vibe on campus. The new coaching staff has been impressive. But this visit to Ohio State this weekend showed him that he's got no questions, any if, way, or but about his potential future with the Buckeyes. He's got a relationship with several coaches that he thinks can make an impact on him. This is one of the more versatile front seven players in the country. He pointed to Larry Johnson being one of the best D-line coaches in the country. Then he was like James Laurinaitis, former captain at Ohio State, a dominant player for the Buckeyes, professional. Thinks those are two guys that can get the best out of him as a pass rusher and as a second-level defender. He's someone that can play so many positions up front, and that's how Ohio State plans on using him. Then he talked about Jim Knowles and scheming him correctly. Ohio State's defensive coordinator had great conversations with him. And then Tim Walton, the cornersbacks coach, he's not going to play in the secondary, but just to show you the full court press that Ohio State's putting on him, he also has a phenomenal relationship with Tim Walton. So he just feels very comfortable around the coaching staff there. The opportunities of being an in-state recruit with an Ohio State degree, former football player, what that could mean for his job opportunities was another thing he pointed to. It's going to take the rest of his visits, but it's up to these other schools now to show him that that they have something better to offer than Ohio State.
All right. Any other intel on Ohio State before we move on?
Well, Riley Pettijohn, the On3 Industries number 2 linebacker, was on campus for his official visit. We like Texas there, but the Buckeyes may be giving them a lot to think about, and there's some people that spent time with them this weekend that think that they are the biggest competition to Texas moving forward.
All right. Ohio State fans, tap in with us. A lot of ground to make up this weekend. Who do you think the Buckeyes made up the most ground with on official visit weekend? Just the first one of June. Let us know. Comment section below. All right. Did Alabama find their QB this weekend? They took a big shot at flipping QB Keelan Russell from SMU. Now, Steve, we've talked a lot about Russell, but things have been picking up quickly between the Duncanville standout and Alabama. And then this past weekend, he was in Tuscaloosa for an official visit. Does SMU have anything to worry about here?
Yeah, absolutely. I talked to his dad, Brian Russell, that said that no doubt Alabama is the leader moving forward. It would be a great situation in the quarterback room. He enjoyed the other recruits and their pitch for him to enjoy Alabama. And the stage and competition is very important. Look, this is a guy that Alabama has marked as QB1 for them in this class after going out and seeing so many of the nation's top passers throw. And Keelan Russell wasn't the only committed guy that they went out and watched throw, but he's the only one that they offered a scholarship to. Him and Nick Sheridan, offensive coordinator, have hit it off quickly. The family loves Kalen DeBoer, what he did with Michael Penix. That atmosphere inside that Alabama building, these guys love working together. It's an incredible culture that's grown on the players quickly. The players have quickly bought into Kalen DeBoer and company, which isn't an easy thing to do when you're replacing a legend like Nick Saban. But Kalen DeBoer has come in quickly with this coaching staff and earned the trust of the Alabama football players. We're seeing it resonate on the recruiting trail, and they are definitely trending for Keelan Russell right now. But Rhett Lashley, SMU, they're not going to go away. Florida's still scheduled for an official visit. So is Oregon. But talking to Keelan Russell's dad, talking to some sources that spent some time with Keelan Russell, knowing what I know about how his mom feels about Alabama, Coach DeBoer, and the development of Michael Penix. This is an exciting time for Alabama and where they stand with Keelan Russell. They just got to get it to the finish line now, so we'll see what happens.
All right, so for those recruiting fans scoring at home, let's take a step back here. Did you just say that SMU commitment, Keelan Russell, has a leader in Alabama?
That's the way that it was explained to me talking to his dad. I said, "It's Alabama.
It's just the first of the cycle." So I just had to make sure that
we have a committed prospect with a new leader. So, all right, take that in. When do we think this could go down for Alabama and Keelan Russell?
I'm not sure that there's an exact timetable on it. Nothing would surprise me if something happened quickly, but he does have these official visits scheduled moving forward to Florida and Oregon. So we'll see if he takes those trips. Certainly when he comes back from this Alabama visit, the SMU coaching staff's waiting right there trying to get some conversations with him as well. So But there's no doubt in my mind that the momentum is with Alabama when he left that campus, and it's up to SMU to swing it back to them. And then Florida and Oregon are also playing from behind.
Yeah, and it seems to me Alabama has now made him quarterback target number 1 on their recruiting board, because at one point, they kicked the tires on Deuce Knight. They talked to Juju Lewis, but it seems like they're zeroing in on Keelan Russell here.
Well, they've kept a lot of guys warm, as all programs do, and they went and saw a lot of guys throw. And I do think that when they got to Alabama, there was a window where Julian Lewis could have committed to them, and they would have taken that commitment. And maybe that's still something that they would do if Julian Lewis called them back. But Keelan Russell's the guy. They went and saw a bunch of quarterbacks throw, and he was the one that they marked QB1, and they've been all in for about a month now on recruiting him. And the parents are excited about Alabama. Keelan is excited about the relationships he's built with Coach Sheridan already and Coach DeBoer. And again, watching Michael Penix go in the top 10 in the NFL draft was big. The stage Alabama plays on is huge. The kind of players he would be surrounded by, the way he felt around the players and other recruits. Alabama is the program with the momentum for one of the nation's best quarterbacks.
Sorry, SMU, but it sounds like the tide is coming. Alabama fans, let me know. Comment section below. Are you guys about to get your quarterback, and how do you feel about Keelan Russell? Is he your number 1 target in the 2025 cycle? All right, let's go down to Coral Gables, where Miami, they're setting the pace for a couple top targets, and this weekend they had in edge Zion Grady, who he is one of them. He's an elite edge in the country, and he was recently an Alabama commitment. He decommitted in the wake of the Nick Saban retirement, and it seems like Georgia, Florida State, Miami, all in the mix here for Zion Grady. What are you hearing coming out of this official visit?
This has been a little bit of a back and forth as of late with Florida State, but I think Miami's firmly in front coming out of this official visit. Again, Jason Taylor has done a phenomenal job recruiting him. What Miami's been able to do on the recruiting trail the past couple cycles shows him a program that has a chance to be very successful, and he's very comfortable around Mario Cristobal and that staff. Alabama's got a chance to sign 3 from that high school with on 300 safety Eric Winters and defensive back Andrew Purcell, also major targets. All 3 of them were on campus this weekend. It would not surprise me if all 3 are future Hurricanes, despite my on 3 RPM for Auburn right now for Eric Winters. I am on Miami for Zion Grady, thinking about Miami for Eric Winters right now. Miami crushed it with those guys, and Zion Grady in particular, high-motored player that can really get to the quarterback, a guy that Miami covets as much as anybody on their board. It's sitting in good position as he continues through his process.
All right, let's talk about another in-state battle, and this one's for running back Byron Lewis. He's out of American Heritage, and Florida State was running away with his recruitment on the recruiting prediction machine, but now it's very tight between Florida State and Miami. And this weekend, he was in Coral Gables. So what are you hearing about this battle?
Well, Miami wants to add another running back to this class, and Byron Lewis would be one of their top guys. And he happened to say that Miami and Coach Cristobal has set a new standard in my recruitment moving forward. So Florida State, it's up to them to get the ball back in their court as they battle Miami for the coveted in-state back. But again, this one's setting up nicely for Miami there. Shakai Mills-Knight is another big running back from Tennessee that visited this weekend that had a great trip too. So Miami in strong position to land another back. Which one's it going to be? Time will tell, but it definitely could be Byron Louis.
All right, now let's head to the Plains. Coming out of the weekend, 5-star wide receiver Caleb Cunningham told Auburn Live that the Tigers are his leader. Steve, how do you feel about this news, and who else do you think is the biggest competition for Cunningham?
Well, obviously, that would be a blow to Mississippi State. They've invested a lot of time, energy, and effort into recruiting Caleb Cunningham. So is Alabama, Florida, Tennessee, to name some others. But Auburn, looking for a second straight top 10 recruiting class. They recruited arguably the best receivers in the country last cycle. That means there's a standard to come in and play behind those guys. You got to be pretty damn good. And Caleb Cunningham has all the traits to come in and push guys like Cam Coleman, who they signed last cycle. He had a wonderful visit. He's saying they're number 1, and that's huge for Auburn. Under this new coaching staff, Hugh Freeze and company, we are seeing Auburn win blue chip battles. We're seeing them beat the best programs in the SEC for top targets. We did not see that under the previous regime. We did not see that at the end of the regime before that. But right now, Auburn's going toe-to-toe with the best in the country on the trail. Caleb Cunningham would be a massive pickup, and as it stands today, they are the one to beat.
Speaking about a massive pickup, on 300 offensive tackle Broderick Scholl was also in town, and it sounds like Auburn's in a really good spot with him coming out of this visit. What are you hearing?
Yeah, my on-3 RPM has been on Auburn for Broderick Scholl, but Nebraska got the last 2 visits. And when you're talking about the top 2 contenders, it's them in Nebraska. He took 2 visits to Nebraska, including his officials, so it was starting to look a little murky for Auburn there because of Nebraska doing such a great job. But I think this visit just reminded him so much of why he loves Auburn. And I still feel good about the Tigers in that recruitment. And I also still feel good about Auburn in the recruitment of cornerback Blake Whitby, who I logged an RPM for coming into the trip. He had a great time with his family. He's going to be back for Auburn's Big Cat Day. No rush to decide, but Auburn is the clear leader for the 4-star out of Baltimore St. Francis.
Yeah, you can really feel Auburn heating up on the recruiting trail. Now, Steve, let's wrap it up. Indiana, they got their shot with 5-star quarterback Julian Lewis over the weekend. He knocks that official visit off his list. Just in general, after we got to sit with him in Nashville, how do you feel about his recruitment? How do you feel about, what did you learn about Julian Lewis?
Well, this was his second time at Indiana, Josh, and don't be surprised if there's a third. I could see him getting back up to Bloomington for a game this fall. I think the biggest thing I'm learning right now about Julian Lewis is that I believe he's going to take his decision into the season. We've talked in the past about him trying to make a final decision before the start of his senior season. But if he's going to decommit, I think from USC, I think he wants to have as much information as possible. So that includes watching how his finalists play during the season because things are going to change. So if you commit to a second school before the season starts and then that doesn't go the way it's dialed up during the fall, then you have potential to have to do this a third time. So I think talking to some people, this one could go into the fall. So he has his upcoming official visit to USC this weekend. He knows what Lincoln Riley can do for him as a player. Number 1 draft pick, Heisman Trophy. If you start for Lincoln Riley, book it. It's a guarantee, or at least it has been to date so far. He's looking at USC. How are they recruiting other players around him? Can they get championship level talent around him for what they're looking to do? They're moving to the Big Ten. That's important to him, how USC is able to recruit around him. But he's excited to get back out there. Colorado and Auburn are certainly still in the mix there as well. Colorado, a chance to start right away on the big stage for Deion Sanders. He was super excited about talking about Colorado at the On3 Elite Series. And this is Auburn's guy at quarterback this cycle. Again, top 10 class in the works right now. Julian Lewis would be major. It's closest to home of all the programs he's still considering. Hugh Freeze, Coach Austin, and that offense is something that's excited to him, what he's seen from them.
So, Steve, do you think that there's any chance that he could come out of these official visits and call it for USC and just shut it all down, say, I'm committed, and start actually recruiting and building a class around him if he's really going to go out to USC?
I do think he's already recruiting for USC right now. We've heard Jakeem Stewart talk about that. CJ Wiley was on campus this weekend for an official visit. One of the most coveted receivers in the country from the state of Georgia. So Julian is saying good things about USC, trying to bring players with him while he's still dotting the I's and crossing the T's on his own recruitment. And again, talking to some people about this recruitment yesterday and today, it makes sense for him to take it into the season and see how these teams play, Auburn, Colorado, Indiana, USC, and go from there, because it's obvious that he's not ready to 100% lock in and commit. So if he were to do that before toe meets leather to start the season, he's still going to be watching for all those other things. Those programs aren't going to stop recruiting him if they are the bridesmaid. So I think he's going to take this into the fall, watch some games, attend some games, and then make a final decision. Please hit like and subscribe, and we'll be back on Thursday to preview another round of big official visits happening across the country.